Alright, so here's the scoop. There's this indie title that recently dropped called Akimbot, and all you really need to know up front is that it is clearly inspired by the Ratchet and Clank games and draws a lot of its design from the PS2 era of that series. And while the Ratchet games serve as the main blueprint, there are some pieces of Jak and Daxter sprinkled in here too. So when talking about this one, I'm going to approach it as not only someone who's playing it for the first time, but also from the angle of someone who is a fan of those games I've mentioned earlier. In the main story, you're playing as a mercenary named Xe who is hired by an ambassador to chase down this diabolical scientist by the name of Evilware. This guy basically wants to bring nothing but destruction to the entire galaxy, and because everyone is too incompetent, Xe is pretty much their only saving grace. He of course is accompanied by a smaller bot named Shipset, much to his dismay. The two of them now embark across the galaxy, jumping from one planet to the next and blowing up hordes of robos on the way. The first thing I want to point out is that the controls are solid. If you've ever played a platformer before, you're gonna feel right at home with how Xe handles in this game. He has a double jump, a short dash that can be done on the ground and the air, and he even has a triple melee combo just like the Lombax we all know and love. His melee combo can do a little more than just turn enemies into scrap metal. For one, he can knock projectiles right back at enemies, which is very satisfying to pull off in the middle of combat, and if he were to swing his blade in mid-air, he'll do a little spin attack similar to how Mario operates from his recent games. That little spin attack gives him some extra airtime, and if you combine that with his other aerial moves, you can perform some ballsy platforming and cover a lot of ground than you normally wouldn't be able to do. The only issue I have when it comes to his melee attacks is that you almost never want to use it during combat outside of playing tennis with the enemy projectiles. This is because the enemies don't react at all when you hit them, and that can lead to some situations where you end up taking unnecessary damage since the enemies won't flinch. Makes sense for the larger enemies though. This takes away any impacts your melee attacks could have had and will likely make them feel worthless. Thankfully, this game does not put you in too many situations where you'll be able to attack up close anyway, since a large majority of the combat is going to involve using your guns. Like the basic controls, the gunplay is smooth as butter. Just like how you're able to do in the Ratchet games, you can freely move around with the left analog stick while aiming at your targets with the right and firing your weapons with the R2 button. If you have trouble hitting those distant foes, you can aim down the sights with the L2, and having that aim assist is going to further help you out, especially during them chaotic fights you're going to be encountering throughout the game. But if you find that aim assist to be too much of a hindrance, you do have the option to turn it off at any time or adjust the sensitivity. All things considered, the controls get an A+ in my book. Now let's get into that gameplay. The main thing you're going to be doing throughout the entire game is running, gunning, and jumping your way through all kinds of obstacles while solving a couple of puzzles here and there. You'll be happy to know that the game does not do a lot of hand holding and will actually treat you as a player who is capable of using their brain. It'll show you enough to get you started, but after that you're going to be on your own throughout most of your time playing. As you are platforming, you're going to have your usual stuff like rotating platforms, footholds you'll need to shoot down in order to use them, certain walls you can run across to get to other areas, and all the while avoiding any hazards you come across. If you are a well-seasoned platformer, you'll breeze through these like it ain't no thing, but if you don't have too much experience with this stuff, you may bite the dust here and there, as this game does provide a decent enough challenge with its level layout. When you're not getting shot at, the obstacles you'll need to deal with will keep you on your toes most of the time, especially when you're trying to evade traps and environmental hazards that will send you straight to the junkyard. The levels you're visiting are no short trek either, as each of them are pretty lengthy with a lot of room to explore and take in the sights. You also won't be doing the same thing in each of these levels either. Without giving too much of it away, sometimes you'll find yourself driving around in a vehicle and popping some baddies, while other times you're up in space playing a good old rail shooter in a similar fashion to Star Fox or Sin and Punishment. There are also a few moments where you even take control of Shipset in small bursts. Don't worry, none of these segments will overstay their welcome, and they're generally short and straight to the point. My only issue with the overall feel of these stages is that I wish that the traversal could have been a bit faster. While Xe's short dash is nice, it's nothing compared to the long jumps many platformer characters have in order to get around faster, and it does make Xe feel a bit sluggish by comparison. Letting him have a sprint or something along those lines could easily solve that issue. Other than that, I don't really have any other problems. Then we have the combat. Oftentimes you'll find yourself blasting away at a number of enemies. Sometimes it will only be a handful, while other times it can be a full-on swarm. While some enemies will try to slap the bolts out of you, many of them will prefer to turn you into Swiss cheese from afar. And if you have the same amount of situational awareness as a brick, the enemy will have no issues doing either of those things to you. Honestly, these battles are almost as punishing as the fights you'll encounter in Jak 2. Thankfully, Xe does have a decent arsenal that will allow him to deal with these threats. weapons. The Robo Homie is equipped with 4 guns: the rifle, the sniper, the rocket launcher, and a Gatling. Each of these guns can be used to take care of certain scenarios better, and none of them run on ammo but rather a heat system, so you don't have to worry about ammo consumption with any of the main 4. You also have 4 different special weapons you can acquire at the shop, and they can be upgraded to gain some useful abilities, but unlike your main weapons, your special weapons consume ammo, and you're only allowed to carry 1 of these at a time. If you want to use the others, you can only switch them at the shop, and as for the ammo itself, it can be replenished by defeating enemies. Not going to lie, I don't really like the idea of only having 1 of these on you instead of being able to carry all 4. It kind of takes the fun out of the weapon experimentation and discovering other ways to take out your enemies. The boss battles in this game also packs a serious punch, and they will put both your platforming and gunplay skills to the test. Some bosses will come down to who can dish out the heavy artillery better, while others will test your ability to aim at certain weak points in order to take them down. No matter which ones you're dealing with, you can expect these boss battles as well as the regular fights to be fast paced and provide enough challenge for you so you won't take any of them lightly, especially since you don't have a disco ball to make everything easier for you in the first place. But these fights are not without its fair share of issues. For one, you honestly don't have a heavy incentive to use many of your weapons in the game because there's really only 1 gun that gets the job done far better than your entire arsenal, and that is your sniper. Because the enemies will often spawn at a great distance, you could just break out the sniper, aim down the sights, and pick them off with 2 hits or less. There are situations where you want to switch to the other guns in order to handle other threats, but old reliable here is definitely going to be your sniper, especially when you're being swarmed with ranged attackers that are trying to do the same thing to you. Trust me on this, your other guns won't be as effective. I tried. Also, I know it's hard to believe that this is the sniper weapon, seeing as how I did not use a scope at all on this gun, but trust me, it is. The weapon just doesn't have a scope function. Does it need it? Honestly, no. But I can understand why some players may find that to be an odd design choice. But what about your special weapons? Well, I would use them often, but unfortunately their ammunition may as well not even be there because you'll run through it very quickly in these fights. And while destroying your foes will keep you in supply, it does not replenish its ammo fast enough. It's because of that I only break out the special weapons when I find myself in a nasty situation, and even then I gotta make sure that every shot counts since my ammo is so abysmal on these things. Part of what made the Ratchet gunplay so fun in those games is that you're able to use every single weapon in almost every situation, allowing for plenty of experimentation and freedom. When you take all of that away by consistently putting the player in a situation where there's only 1 optimal weapon for the job and limit the more interesting weapons we could possibly use, that can potentially suck the fun right out of the experience you're trying to replicate. Now granted, it's not enough to make me put the game down as I still have my own level of fun, but it ain't hard to see why that can turn somebody off depending on who the player is. The only other area in the game I need to talk about are the characters. Once again, to avoid spoilers, I am not going to be showing off too much, but the characters themselves are quite enjoyable. Their mannerisms, jokes, and dialogue are all taken from the PS2 era of the Ratchet games, and even Xe himself is a combination of PS2 Ratchet with Jack from the second game.
Okay, I'll admit it. I'm just plain curious. Just who are you, Xe?
No.
Oh no! I suddenly forgot where that spaceship is!
I'm a mercenary, alright? Fighting, hacking, hunting down mark after mark. That's my life. At least it used to be. Wrong place, wrong time. Now the algorithms put a bounty on my head. I've been on the run ever since. When the Roboglionis caught wind I was on Databay, they jumped me to claim the bounty.
Well, looks like Lady Luck threw us both in the same car, huh? Still, when did mobsters start moonlighting as bounty hunters?
Speak of the devil. Roboglionis dead ahead. Hope you're ready for a fight.
There's a nice layer of spice in his character, which is greatly preferred over the softer direction Insomniac took with Ratchet recently, and at the same time, Xe's demeanor doesn't beat you over the head with it either. It surprisingly has a nice level of balance that will put a smile on Thanos' face. I cannot say the same about his partner though. Out of all the flaws I said about this game so far, Chipset is the absolute worst of them all. Just imagine Daxter without any of the funny, fuse him with a far more annoying version of Claptrap from Borderlands, and this is who you would get. He never shuts up, his jokes are corny as hell, and while I get that he's supposed to be this shifty, roguish comic relief guy, his character just beats you over the head with that archetype to the point where it is insufferable. The last time I dealt with a sidekick this annoying would have to be Bienfu from Tales of Berseria. Between that puntable mascot and this tin can, I can't say who's worse. But despite what I laid out earlier, I was still able to get a great amount of enjoyment from this game. It feels like a genuine love letter to the PS2 era of platforming with a lot of passion behind it. There's no doubt that it needs polishing if it wants to measure up to the Ratchet games, but I can easily see the potential Evil Raptor has to make it happen. And I do hope they come out with a sequel and keep these improvements in mind. I'm glad that I randomly stumbled upon this indie title, and $20 for this game is the perfect price point for it. So if you need something that'll scratch that itch for the time being, the game will do just that. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I know this video is much shorter compared to my usual stuff, but I wanted to test out a new format that will allow me to get these videos out there sooner, and it would mainly be used when covering newer games without diving into heavier spoiler territory, and just talk about the good, the bad, and what needs improvement. If this format is what you want to see more of as newer games come out, you gotta let me know in the comments below, and I will make it happen. Other than that, if you like the video, feel free to hit me with that siggity sub, like it if you dig it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Later!